When we think of ancient Egypt, the images that come to mind are towering pyramids, colossal temples, golden pharaohs, and mysterious hieroglyphs etched into stone. Yet, hidden among these wonders lies a far stranger possibility, one that challenges how we understand not just Egypt, but the very history of human invention. Could it be that thousands of years before Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla, the Egyptians had already unlocked the secrets of electricity? It may sound impossible, even absurd, but scattered clues from the ancient world suggest that this idea deserves more attention than most people realize. The first whispers of this theory often begin with a single artifact, the so-called Baghdad Battery. Discovered in Iraq in the 1930s, this clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod looks eerily similar to what we might now recognize as a primitive galvanic cell, a battery. When filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or lemon juice, modern experiments have shown that it can produce a small but measurable electrical charge. While the Baghdad Battery is not Egyptian, its existence raises an unsettling question. If ancient Mesopotamians could create such a device, could their Egyptian neighbors, far more advanced in engineering, mathematics, and science, have done the same? In the heart of Egypt, one symbol stands out in this debate: the carvings found in the Hathor temple at Dendera. Etched deep into the stone walls are strange depictions that, to the untrained eye, look remarkably like giant light bulbs. Each carving shows what appears to be a bowl-shaped object connected by a cable to a box-like structure, with a serpent running inside the bulb, as though representing a glowing filament. To Egyptologists, these are religious symbols. The so-called Dendera light is said to represent aspects of creation myths, but to alternative historians and fringe researchers, they are clear evidence that the Egyptians may have experimented with electrical light long before modern times. Now imagine for a moment, deep inside the pitch black corridors of a pyramid or tomb, artisans carved intricate hieroglyphs and painted vibrant murals. How did they do it without filling those narrow chambers with thick, choking smoke from torches or oil lamps? Conventional scholars argue they used polished bronze mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into the passageways. But this explanation has serious flaws. Mirrors lose intensity quickly, and the twisting architecture of the tombs would have made it nearly impossible to carry light far inside. If not fire, then what? Could these strange light bulb carvings point to the answer? Skeptics push back strongly, dismissing the idea of ancient electricity as pseudoscience. They remind us that no physical evidence of wires, filaments, or intact electrical devices has ever been found in Egypt. And yet, the Egyptians were master builders and visionaries whose technological achievements still baffle modern engineers. They aligned pyramids with celestial precision, transported massive granite blocks across miles of desert, and built monuments that have survived for thousands of years. To think that they might also have dabbled in a power as mysterious as electricity no longer feels entirely out of reach. So, was electricity truly part of their secret knowledge, or are we simply projecting our modern understanding onto ancient symbols? The answer might be buried in plain sight, hidden in artifacts we've misinterpreted, or lost in the sands of time, waiting to be rediscovered. But here's the haunting thought: if the Egyptians really did harness electricity, even in its most basic form, what else might they have known that we still cannot explain? Among all the mysteries of ancient Egypt, few have fueled as much debate as the carvings in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. Tucked away in the underground crypts of this massive sanctuary are bas-reliefs that to many modern eyes look shockingly familiar. A long bowl-shaped object with a cord extending from one end, connected to what seems to be a box or power source. Inside the bulb, is a serpent, stretching in a wavy line as though glowing with energy. To believers in ancient electricity, this is not a coincidence. It is a literal representation of an ancient lamp. The mainstream interpretation, however, could not be more different. Egyptologists explain that what some call a light bulb is in fact a depiction of the lotus flower, a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth, from which the primeval serpent emerges. The cable is no wire at all but a stylized lotus stem, while the so-called power source is actually a depiction of a pillar representing stability. According to this view, the carvings are entirely mythological and spiritual, not technological. And yet, the skeptic's explanation doesn't quiet the doubts. If this carving were found on its own, perhaps it could be dismissed as symbolic art. But it is repeated multiple times in different variations across the temple walls. The shapes are consistent, deliberate, and strikingly similar to the outlines of glass bulbs we use today. Could it really be a coincidence that an ancient civilization produced an image so close to modern electrical devices? Researchers who support the theory of the Dendera light argue that the temple crypts themselves add to the mystery. These chambers are narrow, dark, and would have been nearly impossible to illuminate with simple oil lamps. No soot marks have been found on the ceilings, which is unusual considering the extensive artwork that decorates the walls. How did the Egyptians create such detailed carvings and paintings in places where sunlight could never reach? Some theorists suggest that these bulb-like devices were not just symbolic but practical tools, possibly powered by a form of ancient battery similar to the Baghdad example. By combining copper, iron, and acidic substances, the Egyptians could have produced small currents, enough to light a filament for short periods of time. Such an invention would have allowed priests and artisans to work in deep chambers without relying on smoke-filled torches or fragile mirrors. Of course, this raises another troubling question. If the Egyptians truly possessed some form of electrical technology, why have no actual devices survived? Could fragile materials like glass and metal simply have decayed over thousands of years, leaving only the stone carvings as evidence? Or is it possible that such technology was deliberately hidden, knowledge reserved for the priesthood, never meant for the wider world? Even more tantalizing is the fact that Egypt is filled with symbols that, when viewed through a modern lens, appear strangely technological. The Ankh, often called the key of life, resembles not only a spiritual emblem but, to some, a device that could connect to circuits or conduct energy. The scepter, symbolizing power, has a forked end that reminds certain researchers of electrical probes. Are these merely symbolic objects, or are we staring at blueprints of a forgotten science? The Dendera light remains one of the most controversial enigmas in archaeology. For some, it is irrefutable proof that ancient Egyptians experimented with electricity. For others, it is nothing more than the projection of modern imagination onto ancient art. But whichever side one takes, the carving itself refuses to lose its allure. It feels like a puzzle placed in stone, taunting us to decode it. And yet, the deeper one looks into the shadows of Dendera, the more unsettling the possibility becomes. What if this was not just a symbol, not just a myth, but a fragment of knowledge deliberately preserved? An echo of something extraordinary that was never meant to be forgotten. When it comes to evidence of ancient electricity, the spotlight often shifts beyond Egypt to a curious artifact discovered in Iraq, the so-called Baghdad Battery. This clay jar, dating back more than 2,000 years, contained a copper cylinder and an iron rod. When filled with acidic liquid like vinegar or lemon juice, it could generate a small electrical current. Most historians argue that if it was indeed used, it might have been for electroplating jewelry, not for lighting. Yet its very existence opens a dangerous door. If the people of Mesopotamia experimented with electricity, could their neighbors in Egypt, who were far more advanced in architecture and engineering, have pushed the boundaries even further? Egyptian temples, filled with precise stone carvings and complex astronomical alignments, suggest a culture obsessed with both symbolism and practical mastery. To some, it is no stretch to believe that they may have stumbled upon a method of harnessing electrical energy, even if only in limited forms. What makes this possibility harder to dismiss is the question of how the Egyptians managed to achieve such feats inside tombs and temples where natural light never reached. Consider the Valley of the Kings, deep passageways, walls covered in vibrant art, yet no traces of soot. Conventional wisdom suggests mirrors might have been used to bounce sunlight into the depths, but anyone who has tested this theory knows how quickly light scatters and fades. Mirrors of polished copper or bronze would not have carried light far enough. And this is where the Baghdad Battery connects intriguingly with Egyptian enigmas. If a crude jar from Mesopotamia could hold a charge, why couldn't Egypt, renowned for its mastery of stone, metal, and chemistry, have refined the idea? Some fringe researchers argue that entire sets of these batteries could have been linked together to produce enough power for basic lighting or ritual demonstrations. The Dendera bulb carvings seen in this light suddenly seem less fanciful and more like the remnants of practical knowledge. Skeptics, however, push back strongly. They argue that no physical light bulbs, filaments, or conductive wiring have been recovered in Egypt. They remind us that ancient cultures often created art that looks familiar to us today, but was entirely symbolic to them. The serpent in the so-called bulb may not be a glowing filament, but a spiritual representation of divine energy, and the absence of soot might simply mean that artisans were skilled in controlling flame, or that soot was cleaned away over time. To archaeologists, the idea of Egyptians wielding electricity is nothing but a modern fantasy projected onto ancient walls. Yet the more one examines these theories, the harder it becomes to dismiss the unsettling coincidences. Why do so many ancient artifacts across cultures appear to echo the form of devices we recognize today? Why do temples hide carvings that look strikingly technical, tucked away where few would ever see them? Were these secret teachings of the priesthood, knowledge preserved in whispers and shadows, shielded from the common eye? The Baghdad Battery proves at least one thing: the ancient world was capable of more experimentation than we often give it credit for. If Mesopotamians toyed with electrical energy, then perhaps the Egyptians, too, were chasing the same invisible force. But the true purpose remains buried beneath centuries of sand and silence, daring us to ask the question most historians avoid. Were the ancients simply artists, or were they scientists whose discoveries vanished before history could record them? And if they truly understood even the faintest spark of electricity, then what else might they have unlocked? Secrets far more powerful, secrets that may have been deliberately hidden from us for reasons too dangerous to imagine. Egyptian temples were not only places of worship, but also centers of knowledge, repositories of astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and mysteries known only to the priesthood. Deep within these monumental structures, carved into walls and hidden in sanctuaries, are images that continue to puzzle historians and inspire speculation. Among the most famous are the reliefs inside the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, where elongated shapes resembling giant bulbs are held by figures, while serpentine lines stretch inside them. Some see a mythological scene, others something astonishing, an ancient depiction of electrical light. If we imagine the priests of Egypt as keepers of hidden sciences, it is not unreasonable to suggest they guarded more than religious rituals. Knowledge was power, and in a society where pharaohs were seen as divine, technology could enhance the illusion of godhood. Imagine stepping into a temple lit not by torches, but by a mysterious, glowing orb. To the average Egyptian, such a sight would confirm the supernatural power of the gods and the divine authority of their priests. It wouldn't need to be widespread or commonplace. Even the illusion of light without fire could shape beliefs and reinforce control. Evidence for such theories, however, is circumstantial. No wires, filaments, or glass bulbs have been found, leading mainstream Egyptologists to dismiss the idea entirely. Instead, they argue these carvings symbolize the creation snake, a mythological image of the universe's birth. But skeptics ask, if these images were purely symbolic, why do they so closely resemble electrical devices in both shape and design? Could the priests have encoded practical knowledge within religious symbolism, ensuring only the initiated could understand? The secrecy of the priesthood only fuels the fire of speculation. We know from ancient texts that knowledge was passed selectively, often restricted to high-ranking officials or temple scribes. Some priests were astronomers, predicting celestial events with uncanny precision. Others were healers, using herbs and surgical techniques far ahead of their time. If they held such advanced understanding in other fields, is it unthinkable that they might also have explored natural forces we only rediscovered thousands of years later? Visitors to these temples today often remark on their design, the ceilings soaring above, the walls lined with intricate patterns, and chambers where light barely penetrates. Some theorists suggest this was deliberate, bases engineered not for natural light, but for demonstrations of controlled illumination, rituals that would astonish the faithful. Imagine a darkened sanctuary, the chanting of priests echoing, and then, suddenly, light filling the room from a hidden source. Was this religion, science, or a careful blending of both? Still, archaeology is a field bound by evidence, and without artifacts to prove electrical devices existed, skepticism dominates. Researchers point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and so far, Egypt has offered tantalizing mysteries but no conclusive answers. Yet history has taught us that knowledge can be lost. The Library of Alexandria, once the greatest storehouse of wisdom in the ancient world, was destroyed. What secrets of science, philosophy, and technology perished with it? Could the blueprints for ancient energy have been among them, swallowed by fire and time? We stand today in temples built thousands of years ago, marveling at their endurance, but perhaps missing their true purpose. Were they monuments to gods, or to a forgotten science disguised in ritual and symbol? The silence of the stone walls keeps their secrets, but the images carved into them whisper something more, a memory of power once known, now hidden. And if the priests truly did possess the knowledge to summon light from darkness, what else might they have concealed? Secrets that could challenge everything we think we know about the origins of human civilization. One of the most persistent mysteries surrounding ancient Egyptian craftsmanship lies in the extraordinary artwork that adorns the interiors of their tombs. Step into the chambers of the Valley of the Kings, and you will find walls covered in vivid colors, intricate hieroglyphs, and breathtakingly detailed images of gods, pharaohs, and journeys into the afterlife. What makes these works so baffling is not just their beauty, but the practical problem behind their creation. How did the artisans illuminate these pitch-black tunnels to paint with such precision without damaging the walls with smoke? Torches and oil lamps were the most obvious tools available, but both leave soot. If hundreds of artisans had worked by torchlight in these confined spaces, the ceilings would be blackened and the artwork tarnished. Yet the tombs remain remarkably clean. Egyptologists counter this by pointing to evidence of reflective surfaces, polished bronze mirrors, that might have bounced sunlight into the chambers. However, experiments have shown that mirrors quickly lose brightness after just a few reflections, producing dim and uneven light that would make delicate painting almost impossible. Could hundreds of workers have produced flawless masterpieces in near darkness? Or was there another, more extraordinary method of illumination? This is where fringe theorists reintroduce the tantalizing idea of electrical light. If the Egyptians had access to a rudimentary form of electricity, perhaps through a series of devices similar to the Baghdad Battery, they could have powered lamps that left no smoke and no soot. The Dendera carvings, once dismissed as purely symbolic, suddenly appear to offer a possible explanation. Imagine simple arc lamps glowing with mysterious brilliance, casting steady light on the walls while artisans worked. It would explain both the cleanliness of the tombs and the sheer scale of decoration completed within them. Skeptics argue this stretches the imagination too far. They suggest workers might have used small oil lamps with salt added to minimize soot, or that they worked in short bursts, constantly cleaning surfaces. Yet no soot residue, lamp black or large scale cleaning evidence has been conclusively found. The mystery deepens with every new chamber uncovered, and the absence of soot remains one of the most stubborn puzzles in Egyptology. Some researchers have proposed another curious idea, that certain stones within tombs might have been chosen for their natural luminescence, glowing faintly after being exposed to sunlight. Could Egyptians have discovered a way to harness glowing minerals to light their workspaces? While this theory is intriguing, it has little supporting evidence and still doesn't account for the scale of the artistry. The truth may never be clear, but the problem refuses to fade away. Were the tombs painted in darkness, with artisans relying on memory and feel? Or is there evidence we are overlooking? Hints of a lost science hidden in plain sight. Each theory carries its own flaws, but together they point toward an uncomfortable realization. Our understanding of ancient Egyptian methods may be incomplete, and that incompleteness opens the door to tantalizing possibilities. Could the absence of soot be more than just a practical puzzle? Could it be the lingering shadow of a forgotten technology, a secret that allowed the Egyptians to literally bring light into the darkness of the underworld? To understand whether the Egyptians might have experimented with electricity, we have to look closely at how they understood the forces of nature. For them, the world was alive with energy storms, floods, the burning sun, and even the spark of life itself were all woven into their mythology. Lightning was not just a natural event. It was the strike of divine power, a weapon of the gods. The sky deity Ra commanded the sun's blazing energy, while gods like Set embodied chaos and destruction. These forces weren't just stories told to peasants. They reflected how Egyptians perceived the universe, as a system driven by unseen powers that could be harnessed, feared, or worshipped. Some researchers suggest that what we call electricity today may have been seen by Egyptians as a spiritual force. In this light, artifacts like the Dendera reliefs might not be literal light bulbs, but symbolic depictions of life energy, cosmic currents flowing through the universe. Yet, here lies the mystery. Why do so many of these symbols look eerily like electrical devices to modern eyes? The bulbs resemble vacuum tubes, the snakes inside them look like filaments, and the figures holding them seem almost like technicians handling equipment. Was this coincidence, or was symbolic art deliberately encoding practical knowledge meant only for the initiated? Even their gods bear curious associations with electricity. Take the god Thoth, patron of wisdom and science. In myths, he is credited with giving humanity writing, measurement, and even the secrets of the stars. Could Thoth also have been the symbolic guardian of lost technological knowledge? Priests of his cult may have preserved fragments of this science, cloaking it in rituals and sacred symbols that outsiders could not interpret. To the average Egyptian, a carving was mythology. To the initiated priest, it may have been a blueprint. Egyptian fascination with energy also extended to animals. The Nile itself was home to electric fish, such as the electric catfish, which can deliver a shocking jolt when touched. Ancient writings reveal that Egyptians were aware of this strange property and even used these creatures in medicine, placing them on patients suffering from pain as a form of natural electrotherapy. If Egyptians understood that living beings could carry electrical energy, might this knowledge have inspired them to seek artificial ways to generate and harness similar forces? The very architecture of temples also fuels speculation. Many were designed with massive stone columns, intricate alignments, and chambers that resonate with sound. Some fringe theorists claim these were not only places of worship, but also devices that amplified natural energies, whether sound, vibration, or even electromagnetic fields. Could electricity have been one of those forces, hidden within rituals that combined science and spirituality into a seamless whole? Mainstream scholars caution against such leaps, reminding us that symbols are not blueprints and mythology is not a manual. Yet history has shown us time and again that ancient peoples were far more observant than we assume. They studied the stars, mapped the flood cycles of the Nile with precision, and developed techniques still admired today. Why then should we dismiss the possibility that their fascination with unseen powers could have led to practical experimentation with energy? Every temple wall, every hieroglyph, seems to hint at a world where the line between science and myth was blurred. And in that blurred space, the possibility remains. Did Egyptians hide fragments of a science too powerful to be revealed openly, encoding it in their gods and their stories so that only the chosen few would ever glimpse its meaning? Because if they did, then the divine light worshipped in their temples may not have been a metaphor at all, but a literal light, flickering in the darkness of ancient sanctuaries, reminding us that the boundary between myth and reality may not be as clear as we think. When we peer into the mysteries of ancient Egypt, we often walk a fine line between uncovering forgotten truths and projecting our modern imagination onto the past. The debate over electricity highlights this tension. On one hand, skeptics argue that there is no concrete evidence. No wires, no glass bulbs, no generators. They warn us that it is easy to see our own inventions in the art of the ancients, especially when symbols can look like familiar objects to modern eyes. To them, the Dendera bulbs are nothing more than elaborate religious motifs, depictions of creation myths woven into the walls of temples. They insist the absence of soot in tombs has simple explanations: clever lamp designs, salt additives that reduced smoke, or the possibility that cleaning was part of the construction process. And yet, doubt lingers. If the explanation were so simple, why does the puzzle refuse to fade? Why do the carvings at Dendera look so strikingly technical? Why do ancient texts occasionally describe gods wielding radiant objects, or light shining where there should have been none? Could it be that our ancestors discovered something fleeting, fragile, something that vanished long before history could record it? The problem lies in the gaps of our knowledge. Ancient Egypt lasted for thousands of years, and much of its history has been lost. Fires destroyed papyri, tombs were looted, and temples eroded. What remains is only a fraction of what once was. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria alone may have erased records of sciences we cannot imagine. If documents describing strange experiments or electrical principles once existed. Their disappearance would leave us with nothing but cryptic symbols and baffling relics. Fringe theorists often argue that our ancestors were not simply primitive builders but custodians of knowledge, some of which may have been passed down from even earlier civilizations. They point to other global mysteries, the precision of the Mayan calendar, the megaliths of South America, or the astronomical alignments of Stonehenge, as evidence of lost sciences. Could electricity in Egypt have been one such fragment of knowledge, glimpsed, used in small ways, then forgotten? Mainstream archaeology resists these ideas because they blur the line between science and speculation. But history is full of rediscoveries. Ancient Greeks knew of steam power long before industrial engines appeared. The Antikythera mechanism, a mechanical computer from over 2,000 years ago, stunned historians when it was unearthed. If such advanced devices could exist in isolation, why not something similar in Egypt? An experiment with energy that never evolved into widespread use. We must also consider the role of secrecy. Egyptian priests guarded knowledge jealously. Sacred rites and hidden chambers were designed to keep mysteries from the eyes of the uninitiated. If electricity existed, it may have been restricted to small demonstrations, rituals meant to awe and control, never shared with the masses and therefore never recorded openly. The priests may have understood that such power could destabilize society if released too broadly. Still, the absence of proof is a stubborn obstacle. Without physical artifacts, bulbs, wires, batteries, the theory remains speculation, and yet that absence itself can feel suspicious. If these devices ever existed, were they destroyed, buried, hidden in tombs still untouched beneath the sands of Egypt? Or could they have been made of materials that did not survive the centuries? This tension between hard evidence and tantalizing possibility is what makes the question so captivating. Were the Egyptians geniuses who harnessed forces we barely understand? Or are we seeing reflections of our own inventions in the art of a people who thought in entirely different terms? The truth may be buried forever. But sometimes the silence of history feels less like absence and more like a secret deliberately kept, waiting for us to uncover what someone long ago wanted hidden. The mystery of ancient Egypt is not only carved in stone. It is also buried deep beneath the sands, concealed in places where few have ever walked. Over the years, archaeologists have discovered hidden chambers within pyramids, secret tunnels beneath temples, and sealed rooms inside tombs that had remained untouched for millennia. Each discovery rekindles speculation. If knowledge of unusual power, perhaps even electrical power, was known to the ancients, could it still lie hidden in these unexplored spaces? The Great Pyramid itself has long been the focus of such intrigue. Modern scanning technology has revealed voids and cavities deep within its structure, spaces whose purpose remains unknown. To mainstream scholars, these are structural anomalies, architectural choices to relieve pressure. But to theorists, they could be repositories, vaults where priests safeguarded their most sacred secrets. Imagine stumbling upon a chamber containing strange devices, metals, or relics we cannot explain. The possibility alone keeps researchers searching, despite layers of stone and secrecy designed to keep intruders out. The concept of hidden knowledge is not far-fetched when we consider how the Egyptians treated their mysteries. Priests were the gatekeepers of divine wisdom, holding rituals in sanctuaries closed to common eyes. Even kings themselves sometimes stood outside these forbidden chambers, barred from entering without priestly approval. Knowledge, they believed, was power, and power was dangerous. If they had stumbled upon a way to summon light without flame, might they not have concealed it as the highest of temple mysteries? Clues scattered across the Nile Valley hint at the possibility. Inscriptions speak of the Eye of Ra, radiating with brilliance, of heavenly boats that shone in darkness, of serpents of light that carried divine force. Were these poetic metaphors, or eyewitness descriptions of something more tangible? If priests indeed wielded devices that glowed or sparked, they would have been perceived as nothing less than miracles, convincing the masses of their connection to the gods. But here lies the paradox. The Egyptians built monuments to last eternity, yet their most enigmatic knowledge may have been deliberately hidden from stone and papyrus, passed orally or guarded in secret rites. Some researchers believe that the destruction of sacred texts, whether by invading forces, natural disasters, or deliberate concealment, was not accidental but intentional. If a technology too advanced for its time once existed, perhaps those who possessed it feared what misuse could bring. Even modern attempts to probe these mysteries have met with strange resistance. Archaeologists speak of permissions denied, of digs halted, of discoveries sealed away. Some argue this is simply bureaucracy, while others whisper of suppression. Could it be that institutions or governments already know more than they reveal? That fragments of forgotten science lie locked away in vaults, too disruptive for public knowledge? Whether one believes in cover-ups or not, the sense of something undiscovered still lingers in every unexplored corridor. The sands of Egypt continue to swallow secrets, and each unearthed relic reminds us that what survives is only a fraction of the whole. Imagine if beneath a collapsed temple wall, sealed in a chamber of gold, lies a device that would rewrite human history. Such a possibility electrifies the imagination, and yet the silence of the desert is unbroken. The tombs keep their secrets, the chambers remain sealed. We are left to wonder, did the ancients lock away knowledge that could change everything we think we know about civilization? Some say the greatest discoveries are not behind us but still waiting, hidden in the very stones we've barely begun to understand. As we draw together the threads of Egypt's strange and captivating story, one truth becomes undeniable. Their civilization left behind more questions than answers. The monuments rise above the desert like riddles carved in stone, each block whispering of secrets we can scarcely imagine. And among these mysteries, none is more electrifying, literally, than the question of whether the Egyptians tapped into forces of energy far beyond their time. The evidence, while fragmented, continues to haunt us. Carvings that resemble bulbs, chambers that may have conducted electricity, legends of glowing light in the darkness of temples, materials aligned in ways that echo modern engineering. To skeptics, each of these is a misinterpretation, a leap of imagination where none is warranted. But to others, they form a pattern suggesting that the Egyptians may have uncovered a principle we have only recently begun to understand. It is tempting to dismiss these ideas as fantasy. After all, where are the devices? Where are the wires, the generators, the batteries? Yet the sands of Egypt have swallowed much, and history itself has a way of erasing inconvenient truths. How many scrolls were burned in the Library of Alexandria? How many treasures were plundered, melted down, or destroyed by time? Could it be that what survives is only the faintest shadow of a greater knowledge once possessed? Even mainstream Egyptology acknowledges that this was a civilization of astonishing sophistication. Their grasp of astronomy rivaled that of cultures thousands of years later. Their medicine, preserved in texts like the Edwin Smith Papyrus, reveals a scientific approach to anatomy and surgery. Their architecture, so precise that modern builders still marvel, required advanced understanding of mathematics and engineering. If they could achieve so much, is it truly impossible to imagine that they stumbled upon a force of nature we now call electricity? But here lies the most tantalizing question of all. If they did, what happened to it? Why does history show no continuity, no progression from this supposed knowledge into later Egyptian society? Perhaps it was restricted, used only in temples by the priesthood, forbidden to the masses. Perhaps it was misunderstood, an accidental discovery never fully mastered, or perhaps it was lost in the tides of conquest, when foreign empires swept through Egypt, scattering its secrets to the winds. Modern science continues to probe. Researchers recreate ancient batteries, test carvings with electrical theories, and debate endlessly in conferences and documentaries. Each test seems to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Was it electricity, or was it simply myth? Could we be projecting modern concepts onto ancient imagination? Or could the Egyptians have been trying to tell us something we still don't fully understand? The legacy of Egypt is one of wonder, of awe, and of endless speculation. It reminds us that human history is not a straight line but a puzzle with missing pieces, and every time we think we've solved it, a new discovery shifts the picture once again. As you stand before the glowing hieroglyphs in a dimly lit temple, as you gaze at the shadowy voids inside the Great Pyramid, as you read of serpents of light and eyes of gods, it is difficult not to feel the thrill of possibility. What if these were not just stories, not just symbols, but memories of a power we have forgotten? The sands of Egypt still guard their secrets. But one thing is certain: the deeper we dig, the closer we come to revelations that could shock the world. After all, the greatest question may not be whether the Egyptians invented electricity, but whether they used it for purposes we have yet to even imagine.